Sounds like we might have had a little sound issue, so those of you just hearing us, thank you very much for joining. Welcome to the PC Gamer Show this week, sponsored by Drop Zone. We are now free to play on Steam, and we're very glad that they have sponsored this show, and very glad that Wes and Steven are joining us here today. It's going to be a good show, I think. We're going to be talking about latest events like usual, but also this week, oh surprise, Bayonetta came out on Steam.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy and cool.
It's pretty awesome. The game came out in, what, 2009 originally?
It was a while ago, yeah.
2008, maybe?
It's been like a decade since that game came out, so it took long enough, but, I mean, better late than never, right? We're also going to be talking about the reason we are dragging Steven on the show while sick and dying.
This is abusive.
It is, but, you know, you're here to talk about an abusive game, which is why we have you here.
Good segue.
Yeah, I know, right?
I liked it.
Steven was over at EVE Fanfest, the big event for EVE Online in Iceland?
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, right in the heart of Reykjavik.
There you go. So he has some hopefully tantalizing stories, because that game is oh so good for stories.
Was this like your second or third FanFest?
So like in total it's 4 because they have one in Vegas as well. Okay. But this is my second one in Iceland. Yeah.
So you're just covering EVE like crazy events twice a year.
Yeah, like I go to exactly. It's absurd and also the highlight of my career.
Max Ursa just subscribed for 10 months in a row saying, hey, yo, it's my birthday. Happy birthday, Max Ursa, and thank you for subscribing.
We should subscribe to him for his birthday.
Yeah, that is what should happen.
It's very nice, you, Max.
Speaking of Max Ursa, who I know is very much into Elite, let's start off with some latest news. We're, of course, going to be talking about what we've been playing recently and taking your questions from Twitch chat at the end of the show, but some stuff that's going on in this week in PC gaming. I know Max Ursa is a fan of Elite Dangerous. Elite Dangerous just got its 2.3 Commanders update, which adds multi-crew ships and adds an actual avatar creator to the game. It's a pretty significant update, because to me it feels like now that they actually have characters and avatars that you can look at yourself and you can look at others, it opens up the door to a lot more things happening in that game, like potentially sort of walking around space station-y type social stuff that it didn't have before.
You are not just a ship.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're not just a ship anymore. You're actually a person in it.
And have they been talking about doing, big crew stuff since they created the game? Since the Kickstarter, has that always been kind of part of the vision for it eventually to get to that point? Because I feel like it has, but I haven't followed it really, really closely, so I'm not completely sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure going that far back. I know that multi-crew ships and stuff like that has always been part of what they've kind of projected with the Horizons add-on. Everyone knew this was coming. It is to say it just has been like, that add-on, or the whole Horizons thing has had delays, and they've just been going under the impression of we'll release it when it's done, sort of. And so this is finally here is a really cool thing. And Max Ursa actually says in the chat that they've wanted co-op play in many forms for a while. So it's been something on their minds for sure.
I mean, this is another. There's this kind of interesting ongoing, I don't know if rivalry is the right word, but this parallel track that it's taking with Star Citizen, right?
Yeah.
Where Elite came out first with a much humbler plan, a much humbler game, what you could do in it, than Star Citizen did with its initial plan. But Elite has been slowly adding on these things to its kind of initial, final release, right? Like when Elite came out, it was not, here's beta version 0.2. It was like, here's Elite Dangerous. And now they've added these really big things onto it. And meanwhile, Star Citizen is kind of making each of those little pieces by itself in this really raw form. And someday, maybe they're going to all come together into this amazing thing. But it's cool that for people who really enjoy space sims right now, you have Elite, which is kind of just doing it.
Yeah, I'll admit, when I first played Elite, when it first came out, I was super underwhelmed. I just didn't think there was much to do, and they've done a very, very good job of building that game out.
Plus, there's some alien war stuff that's going to happen at some point.
Who knows?
It's very exciting.
Some other news Varian Deal just subscribed for 5 months in a row. Thank you very much. But some other stuff that happened this week is the Overwatch event that just happened. Overwatch Uprising just launched yesterday. It's a new PvE mode, a bunch of new skins. Hey, you know, the drill by now. I mean, it's insane. Bo was telling me, like, or Bo brought up that the game hasn't even been out for a year yet. And it's incredible to think that I'm already like, oh my god, like another thing, you know? It's only been like a couple months since the last one. Like, they update that game like crazy. But it's a good PvE mode. Like, it's a really... I talked publicly, like I talked on this podcast back when the Halloween one came out with the PvE, that I thought it was like kind of like fun, but then it just got really boring really fast. And
I think I played it once.
Yeah, and that's kind of all you needed to play it. This one is really good. Like, it's really a cool thing. And it's a bit longer, it's a bit more involved, and you can do it in a different mode where you actually play as any character. It's not just restricted to the 4 characters in the like standard mode. It's set like 7 years before the game, so it's this cool kind of bit of history. And there's tons of cool voice lines that like talk, like really get into the lore of like the game. So it's as I said to Bo earlier today, actually, it is the best argument for an Overwatch campaign that they have put out so far. Like I played it and I was like, they just need to have a single player or a co-op like campaign mode, because this is a lot of fun.
That's interesting. How long until you think we get the Overwatch Hollywood adaptation?
Oh man, I bet they're in talks. I bet they've been in talks since the game launched or before.
But given Warcraft, how Warcraft went, maybe they'll be a little gun shy on that. But there's so much fandom around the lore of that game now, around what is... I think they've put more work into that lore than I expected. Like I've kind of thought at first it would just be the thinnest possible excuse for why a giant gorilla and a cowboy would be fighting each other in like weird future setting, you know, futuristic whatever. But it seems like they've really just kept slowly adding cool new stuff to this kind of the overarching story of that game, and now they're doing that with PvE. So
yeah, it's neat. And actually I heard, and I'm not 100% sure this is true, but I had heard that the more times you beat this mode, the more possible voice lines are added to the voice line pool while you're playing it. So, like, as you play it more, it actually will reveal more stuff, and you'll get more backstory, which I think is a neat way to do that.
It's a cool idea.
Like, at a certain point, do they even need, like, a full-fledged campaign? Can't they just kind of continue doing what they're doing, which is every couple of months have this event that comes out that fills in some chapter of the backstory?
Yeah.
Versus, like, okay, here's, like, a traditional 9-hour campaign or something.
It'll be interesting to see if that's the way they start going with the events, because I think most of them so far have been kind of like a special seasonal thing, right? Where like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think May's snowball fight was like part of Overwatch canon in a significant way.
No, it was not.
but maybe we're going to see more of the events go in this direction of Uprising, where it's not just like, oh, here's a goofy themed thing, but like here's kind of a chunk of our world that we're revealing through this new special thing.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think, and I believe this is the first event not based around some sort of holiday or thing, right? Like the first one was the Summer Games, and then I believe everyone since then, you know, even if the Christmas one wasn't really Christmas, it was still like the winter Christmas one,
right?
Basically.
The holiday.
Yeah, and there was Halloween, and there was Chinese New Year. I think this is the first one that's really just like, hey, we're just going to tell a story in the Overwatch world and not really, like, not care about the fact that nothing is happening in April.
I wonder what they'll do for, like, the 1-year anniversary of the game launching.
I don't know, man.
Right? They got to do something.
Got to do something.
Overwatch 2. It'll just come out.
It's just there.
Yeah.
$80.
24 new characters.
$80, twice the price of what Overwatch 1 cost.
Was it only $40 on PC?
Yeah. God. For the standard edition, it's $40.
What a deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was $60 on console because they made you buy the special edition or whatever, but Yeah, $40. This is the last thing I'll say on Overwatch before we move on. I do think it's interesting that the conversation about a year ago was like, why would we pay full price for this game? They're going to have to really keep it updated, like, unless they like give us tons of free stuff. Like, this is stupid that it's not a free-to-play game. And like, that's what a lot of people were talking about, was like, are they really going to support this? And like, a year later, they've kind of proven that they have. Like, Blizzard really stepped up in that regard. And you can hate Blizzard for whatever reason, but like, kind of got to give them credit in that. All right, let's move on, though. Let's go to Now Playing and talk about what we've been getting into lately. I want to actually start. I mentioned this like super briefly at the end of last episode, or at the end of the Now Playing and last episode, that I've been playing Divinity Original Sin Enhanced Edition again. At that time, I'd only played like 2 hours of it, and now I'm way deeper into it. I think I'm like 10 to 12 or so.
So you're like 20% through.
Yeah, not even. And it's, God, I forgot how good that game was. This is my first time playing through Enhanced Edition. Well, let me put it this way. This is my first time getting past Cyseal in Enhanced Edition, which, if anybody who's played the game knows, Cyseal's the very first town, and there's this thing that happens. Like, I hate games that do this, where when you try to replay them, there's like a thing at the beginning that just makes you never want to replay it.
Just makes you go, oh, this part.
Yeah, and basically, that's Cyseal for Divinity, where I think Divinity is an incredible game, don't get me wrong, but Cyseal is like maybe 3 to 4 hours of talking to NPCs until you are level 4, so you can actually go fight the zombies outside the gate. It is a ton of dialogue that is just totally not broken up, and we made it through that. We made it through the hump. And so now we're actually playing that game.
I think the hump for me in Divinity was less the talking to people part and was just figuring out the basics of that game. Because at least in the Enhanced Edition, it does not at all hold your hand in terms of how the character classes work and like how you should be speccing or anything. And so my friend and I played about 4 or 5 hours kind of just figuring out how to play that game before we realized that at launch, the 2 characters you could recruit were like the 2 classes that we had picked for our main characters.
Right.
And we're like, well, this sucks. There's like 8 or 10 interesting classes in this game, and we have 2 of them represented with this, that we happen to choose. And so then by that time we figured out like what different skills could actually do. We're like, all right, let's re-roll and like pick different classes and start over again. And second time through, it went way faster just because we knew what the hell we were doing and weren't getting our asses kicked in combat.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do that sort of 6 to 8 hour restart in Divinity.
Because even that first like just hour on the beach or so can be kind of rough if you don't know what you're doing. Which I think no one did in Divinity because it just throws you into it, which is admirable that it got so many people to stick through it.
Yeah.
You know it's a good game if everyone you talk to is like, yeah, I restarted 6 hours in, but they still played through the game.
Yeah, no, definitely. Steven, did you play Divinity?
Yeah, no, I was just like reminiscing on how hard that game was to start with. I didn't play with anyone, but yeah, I remember like I re-rolled 6 hours into it, and I got past the town, and I had a really good time with it. But that was not an easy game to get into.
Well, there's that thing with RPGs too, especially long RPGs like that, where they essentially ask you the hardest question of the entire game before you've even started playing the game, which is like, what type of character do you want, and what do you want your abilities to be? And you have no idea what this game is, and you don't know how to play it, and you don't know what the abilities really mean, and they're asking you these questions right off the bat.
I really appreciate that a few RPGs of the past several years, and I'm blanking on exact examples, but I feel like at least one of Obsidian's games is like this, maybe some other ones, are designed to fix that very issue, where they're letting you either go back and change decisions you've made, or they're not having you make those decisions until a bit later to exactly solve that issue of, oh, you chose a class and some core skills and now you're locked into those for the next 60 hours, even if you have no fucking idea how you want to play this game.
Yeah, like Tyranny Tyranny just had no class system. You were just picking skills and abilities, but you could always walk back and try something new. You were never like attached. And like even Mass Effect had a system where you could kind of be anything you wanted at a certain point. Mass Effect Andromeda Had a fairly flexible skill system. I'm to a point now where I'm a little bit tired of like really rigid class-based RPGs.
Yeah.
Because for that one problem entirely, like I hate playing a character and realizing like I hate this class archetype. And now I'm stuck 20 hours in this game, and it's either all for naught or I have to just endure.
Yeah, the Skyrim and Oblivion kind of tried to solve that problem like a little bit, right? Where when you get through the tutorial area, it's like, do you want to change your race? Do you want to change your class? Do you want to change your starting stuff? And it gives you that option, but it's still too early on to really know what you like yet.
You have killed 3 crabs and seen a cave. Would you like to change everything about your persona?
Then I real quickly want to call out a couple games that are like indie games that I've been playing lately. Slime Son is a fantastic kind of Super Meat Boy style platformer.
Oh, nice! I've seen the trailer for that.
Yeah,
when they launched it.
Very, very good. Hacky Zack, another one of those. It's a kind of puzzle platformery sort of thing where you actually have a ball that you have to kick, and it's like hacky sack, like you have to juggle this ball to get it to these places, and it's really, really hard, but very, very good. Another one is Bomb Squad Academy. If you like puzzle games and electrical engineering and that sort of stuff, Bomb Squad Academy is only like an hour long or something like that. It kind of feels like they made the tutorial for the game and then they didn't actually make the game after it. But
ouch.
But what is
I love
there?
that pitch.
But what's there is really, really, really fun.
That sounds terrible. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was the worst way.
Dang it.
You could have described something.
I mean, I had fun with it. I thought it was a good game.
Tom fucking loves tutorials.
Damn
He
it.
loves
No.
Yeah.
So
I also love that your description of it was if you love puzzle games and electrical engineering.
Well, yeah, because it's like a bomb defusal game.
Sure, but that was just the driest description of anything.
If you like
I'm sorry.
I have a great game. Actually, there is a game about watching grass grow, so there you go.
Also, I don't think we gave enough attention to the hacky sack thing.
Hacky Zack?
Right.
But just like hacky sack as a concept
is
really underrepresented in video games, I think.
Yeah, and it's hard in Hacky Zack too. Actually, I'm gonna try to pull up a video of this real quick because it is a tricky game and it is a pretty game. But juggling that ball like in midair while doing other things and like while trying to not die yourself is really hard. And there are these platforms that like you can go through, but the ball can't go through, and it's a very good game. Then one more game that I wanted to give a shout out to was The Signal from Tolva, which is a game that we actually reviewed on the site, where it's the follow-up to Sir, You Are Being Hunted, and you're like a robot on an alien planet, and you're trying to find these signals hidden around the world. It's open world. Surprisingly good shooting in that game. It doesn't look like the type of game that's going to have the good guns and stuff, but it actually has pretty good shooting in it, and it's a pretty cool concept, and it's very, very well made. I think we gave it like an 80 on the site, so it's a good game.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you guys?
That's a whole list of stuff.
I've been playing a ton of stuff this weekend. Like this weekend and this week was, sometimes I come on here and I'm like, oh, I was doing something this weekend and I played Hearthstone and that's it, or something like that. I guess not Hearthstone, like, you know what I mean. And
one of the other 7 card games you keep up with.
Yeah, should I bring those up?
No. Tom plays all the card games.
Last week I found a free-to-play early access hex-based tactical card game called Shardbound. That just launched last week. And then there's a new one called Cross Maga that just came out that is also a tactical free-to-play card game that I haven't played yet, but I'm gonna. There are too many. If anybody wants to know, though, I moved away from Shardbound. I was less impressed by that one than stuff like Faria.
Is Duelist still your favorite?
Duelist is still my favorite. Duelist is still the top one that I'm playing. It has held out through all of that. What about you, though? What have you been playing, Wes?
What have I been playing? Still been playing a lot of Zelda, which is not on the PC, although
that's fair.
I've been following the progress of the Cemu emulator. I've written about it some on the site, but I've also just been following their improvements to that and looking at screenshots of people running Breath of the Wild at 4K or higher. And man, it looks really good, as you would expect. It seems like it's still kind of buggy. So like they fixed the big issues that made it basically unplayable, but there are still little bugs as you would expect from an emulated game, crashes and stuff like that. So I don't know when I'm gonna try emulating it myself because I need to like hack my Wii U basically and dump the game and copy my save file over and that kind of stuff. But I'll try it eventually when it feels like it's a little more stable. So on the PC, I have not been playing too much recently. My Total War Warhammer 2 co-op campaign is winding down. I'm almost finished with that with a friend of mine. I had a giant like slugfest with Chaos, with Archeon, the Lord of Chaos, and took my Vampire Knights like 4-stack of full armies of like top tier units up against him and managed to kill him. Which was very satisfying. But I haven't played that for a few days. My co-op buddy has been busy.
That's a commitment.
It is. It's like a good 50-hour co-op commitment. And half that time you're just going to be sitting there, like not playing while the other person plays.
Also, that battle with the Archeon is intense.
Yeah.
Like, it's a little bit terrifying.
Yeah, he is strong.
Like very strong.
He is very strong. That's the thing in Total War Warhammer that you didn't have in the previous games is when you look at the like auto resolve weighting it gives to battles and like the odds that it gives you. So much of that number can come down to just a hero unit who against something that is not like a top tier melee infantry will just fucking wreck whatever you throw them up against. Like a lot of my vampire count heroes are spellcasters, so they're not great in melee. They're still much better than your general melee unit, but I can't throw them into an entire unit of like badass melee and have them kick ass. But the melee specialist heroes like Archeon can just wade into one of your units of 100 guys who are all heavily armored and like top tier, and he can just fuck them up. Like he can just waste those guys. So you really have to just pour units into them. And when strategically you need to like meet the enemy line and like make sure you don't get flanked and all this stuff, and then there's one guy who can just punch through and just kill, tons of your units. Like it's really tough to deal with those guys.
Well, and they have, I don't know about you, but anytime I've fought him, he always has like chaos horsemen that can flank from the behind. So I fought him. The one time I fought him was as the dwarves, and the dwarves are like melee specialists, but every single time I ended up getting screwed because he would send his horsemen to flank us from behind. So all my dwarves are trying to fight this one. He's basically Sauron in the beginning of Lord of the Rings when he's just swinging like a mace and like 100 people are just going flying through the sky.
That is very accurate. Yeah, he is Sauron.
I mean, if we're going to start comparing Lord of the Rings and Warhammer, it's a slippery slope. But yeah, anyway. It was just it's a scary fight. It demands a lot. I can see him like just ruining people's games because if you lose your armies to him and you have nothing else prepared, like you're basically dead.
So my really satisfying moment was taking like a couple of my really good armies up against him, and I think he had a reinforcing army, and my friend using I had some really good vampire cavalry and using those to one, counter his cavalry, which he didn't have much of, but more importantly, take out his hell cannons, which are really devastating artillery. Right. But we got really lucky and had like a forest battle map where most of our army could stay kind of obscured in the forest and they wouldn't be just pelted by the artillery from the very start of the match. And so we stayed in the forest and then were able to use the cavalry to get back there and take out the hell cannons, and that makes a huge difference. And then after defeating his front line, Archeon himself actually broke and started running, which is pretty uncommon because the Chaos guys have such high morale. They don't give a shit. Like if they're all gonna die, they will just stand there and fight you to the death, which the dwarves will kind of also do. But we had such overwhelming odds against them at that point that the whole line broke, and Archeon himself is like running away across the map. And so we sent two Vargeists, which are giant vampire hell dragons, to just chase him down and just like fly behind him over over the map and kill him before he got off the edge of the map. So
what an amazing end to that fight.
It was pretty good, especially because it's like you see him like running kind of goofy like running animation, and then directly behind him one of the Vargeists lands, and instead of flying, it just like crawls along the ground behind him at a pace you would not expect a dragon to be able to walk. But whatever, it's fine with me if the Vargeist wants to be extremely fast and catch Archeon. So yeah, that's Total War Warhammer. It's a pretty fun game. If you like strategy games, you should play that.
That's another example of a developer doing a good job of updating too, because they've done DLC since it came out. But
they have, although people have been pretty upset with the pricing for the DLC.
I didn't realize that. I know that they do paid DLC next to free DLC. Like they added a whole faction recently.
They have, yeah, they did put out Bretonia for free, but most of the previous factions have cost like $15, something like that. That people are pretty upset about because the game launched with fewer factions than you have in the previous Total War games.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
I kind of see the justification there though, because if you look at Rome, for example, you have a lot of factions, but they're all very similar. And some of them are distinct, right? But you'll have Rome, and then you'll have kind of the sub-factions of Rome with units that are more or less identical. Whereas in Warhammer, every race is completely distinct from the other races. And they have their own sub-factions, but the dwarfs and the vampire counts, nothing alike. You know, they play differently. Their units all look completely different. So there's a lot more work that goes into them. But I think the factions have been a bit expensive. And I don't know how the Total War Warhammer 2 thing as being this kind of like standalone expansion is going to sit with people, because they're adding another 3 or 4 factions, I think. And I don't know if that's going to be a $60 game or a $30 game, or how they're going to price that.
Well, and it's almost like a risky situation they're in, because with Rome, all the factions are kind of the same. So you don't really get really bad factions, but I've seen complaints of people being like, the Beastmen are just designed very poorly because they have to build this entire faction from the ground up. If sort of like the central idea of that faction isn't very fun or appealing to a large majority of people, that faction just really falls flat.
I find the Beastmen just obnoxious, because all they do is just run around the campaign map and just burn your cities down. They're not working towards any goal. They're not accomplishing anything. They're just there to be dicks, basically.
You're just marauders, totally.
Which is not super fun to play against.
They've announced, this isn't obviously ideal, but they've announced Total Warhammer 2, right?
Right, that's what I was just bringing up. So it's excuse me, it's kind of it's not really a sequel. It's going to be, so it can stand alone, but it will also, if you have the first game, the maps will combine into an even bigger map. So it's not going to feel like a dramatically new game.
Okay, so I was...
From what we can see, I mean, they could surprise us. But
I was going to say maybe they would take that opportunity to, like Stephen was saying, kind of reevaluate the groundwork of some of those criticized factions, but we'll see.
I would love that, and we're actually going to run an article on the site tomorrow of what we want from Warhammer 2, and what I expect from it is a game that mechanically is just exactly the same as Warhammer 1, but with some new factions and a new map. I don't expect them to be radically changing anything, but there are a lot of things that I would really like to see them change, because after playing the past 4 Total War games, I'm personally getting kind of tired of the exact same framework for each of those games, because there's so much potential in a game set in feudal Japan, for example, to have really interesting political, economic systems tailored to that setting, just as there are for a game like Warhammer. They shouldn't have the same core features, but there's only so much you can do when your series Total War is going to have a new game every year or 2 years. You can't be expected to build this, completely bespoke design for that setting, or maybe you can. I don't know. That's what I would like to see. I'm not surprised when it doesn't happen for those practical reasons, but I would love to see Warhammer 2 really, really, really double down on the quest stuff that they've done in the game to kind of bring in that like RPG feel. It's pretty cool in what they what they did in the first game. Like you take your lords on these quests and it brings some story in and it just makes it feel much more Warhammer-y. I would love to see them focus more on that, change kind of the presentation of those quests to make them not just feel like they were shoehorned into the Total War formula with like a little parchment scroll that pops up in the middle of the screen with like one paragraph of text. They could do more with that presentation. They could make that more interesting and then do something instead of a diplomacy system that's exactly the same as every other Total War game and has always been just crappy, basically, to, I don't know, what would diplomacy look like in Warhammer lore? Like, I don't know Warhammer very well, so I can't say, but surely there's a more interesting way to deal with parlay between the dwarves and the greenskins, for example, than what this game has in it.
Yeah, I'm not a Warhammer buff, unfortunately, but I know there are people listening right now who are immediately have their minds racing about.
They're probably like, diplomacy, that's bullshit. Why would they ever talk to each other?
Well, you said that, and I was like, there's your problem, man. You're trying to parlay with the greenskins as the dwarves. It's never going to happen.
So maybe it shouldn't have diplomacy. Maybe it should have some other system altogether, right?
War.
So the problem in my vampire count campaign is nobody likes the vampire counts at all because they're undead and they spread corruption across the entire world. Who wants to be neighbors with that?
You're like asking them like, hey, you want to trade? Or
So functionally, like my friend who's playing as the Empire has like made alliances with everybody in the world because he's like the most powerful faction. And so they like, oh, we don't want to go to war with him. Let's be friends. No one will give me the time of day. Like if you look at my like his like you get like a political rating with the other factions and it'll be this addition of all these things like, oh, they like you because you're at war with this person and because you're trading and all this stuff. His will be like positive 130 or something, and mine are all like negative 300 because just everybody is just like, no, your vampire counts, fuck you, no, go away, we don't want to talk to you. So it's like there's this whole system in the game that is pretty worthless with that faction, and surely there's a way that you can design something more fun for these relationships.
It's so flavorless, especially when it's like, yeah, exactly. Like it would be cool if they had a diplomacy system that was specific to each faction. So like the vampires, their diplomacy system would be like mentally dominating people into becoming their vassals.
There we go.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
Like,
I like it.
Yeah, plus, email me, Creative Assembly. I got ideas.
Hope you're listening, Creative Assembly.
Yeah.
One touch I do love, though, is that even if it's functionally the same, each faction has like a different type of currency, and the vampire counts as like soul energy. I forget the word for it, but basically your money is like the souls you have harvested from whoever whoever you harvest souls from, I guess.
And you're sitting here being like, why does nobody like me?
Hey, I understand why no one likes me. I just wish there was something I could do about it.
Okay.
I did have one ally, and then I broke that alliance, and that went very, very south. That was a bad time. We won't talk about that.
Well, let's move on here. Steven's scratchy voice, tell us what he's been playing lately.
So scratchy.
What have you been getting into?
I don't have much to say because I was in Iceland all week. So, yeah, like
I
played
anything
a
on the
bit
plane.
Of Nier. Yeah, like I played Nier while I was there for a bit. But really, since I've been back, I've been playing Persona 5, and that's not a PC game. So,
Anthony behind the camera just got very excited that you said Persona 5.
Hey.
But here's a question that I'll ask you.
Sure.
In maximum, actually no maximum, but in as few words as possible, what genre is Nier?
Oh man, well, like I'm like 6 hours into it, and that game has surprised me so many times. I'm not even sure if I can conclusively say yet. It's a shoot 'em up RPG with I don't even know, man. That's what makes that game great.
Is it a sad action RPG?
What is a sad?
Just sad.
Because that game is real sad, apparently.
Oh, just so like
it's not
that
an
wasn't an
acronym.
acronym?
Just sad.
Okay.
Well, we could make it an acronym, right? Like the first S would be shoot 'em up, and then A would be action, D would be something. Someone.
Shoot and
depressing.
Shoot and depressing
RPG. Cool. There you go, guys. You heard it here first.
We did it.
The new genre storming the world and taking over all the MOBAs is
depressing shooters.
Sad RPG.
I'm psyched to play Nier. I will play it sometime this year.
It's very good.
But for some reason, yesterday decided to start a different RPG. Maybe we can talk about Japan Week, which we're running on the site a little bit before we move on to Bayonetta, which is, I guess, part of Japan Week, really.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'd love to talk about that. So for those of you who don't know, as we move towards Bayonetta, one of the exciting things about Bayonetta coming this week is that we are hosting a Japan theme week on PCGamer.com. Wes Fenlon, over to my left here, has been setting up some great articles. He had this amazing feature that you should absolutely look up on PCGamer.com, all about the rise of PC gaming in Japan, and really just some eye-opening stuff about like why PC gaming has traditionally been less popular in Japan. So it's really cool. We've got content planned all week in that vein, and part of that was a full performance report by Durante about Bayonetta, which was really cool. But yeah, let's talk about those in Japan and Bayonetta and all that.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is last night I bought and played about the first hour of The Legend of Heroes: Trails in the Sky, which is like half of a game name that I really despise, and half of with what I think is like Trails in the Sky, pretty cool name, not bad. The Legend of Heroes, worst name possible. Like most possibly generic thing you could come up with for a video game title, short of like, I don't know, like what were some of those knockoff Call of Duty like mobile games, like Call of War Duty or something? You know, one of those. Like, it's slightly less generic than that, but just about that bad.
It's actually more generic than the shooter name that Chris made by just asking people to like choose words in a Google form.
Our shooter poll, that was pretty great. I don't remember the name of that one. Do you?
I'll find it.
But anyway, one of the games that I'm not really covering in depth this week that I wish I was is Trails in the Sky, which is, for people who've never heard of it, is an RPG series that Xseed, who kind of are a small publisher in the U.S., have been bringing over to the States for the past like 5 or 6 years. And it was originally published in Japan in like 2004, I believe, by this company called Nihon Falcom, who also make the Ys series, YS. And they are one of the few Japanese developers who stuck with the PC through like the 90s and early 2000s, when essentially no one was playing PC games in Japan anymore, when that market just kept shrinking and shrinking. So this is actually a PC game from 12 years ago, 13 years ago, that was never localized back at the time because no one thought there would be an audience for it. And Xseed brought the first one to the States in 2014, 2012. I forget my dates now. And then they also brought the sequel, localized the sequel a couple years ago. And the third game in the series is coming out in about 2 months, I believe. And so these games are held up by some people as being some of the best JRPGs ever. They're pretty simplistic looking, they're like isometric 3D, not a whole lot going on there graphically, but apparently they just have tons and tons and tons and tons of text and character, and they're like 100-hour, epic games. And for some reason I decided to start that last night instead of Nier because I'm a masochist, I guess. I don't know. Who knows if I'll ever finish it. But
it's always weird. Do you ever get that weird feeling though when you're like starting like 100-hour JRPG and you're just like, why am I doing this? Like, can I commit 100 hours?
So while I was starting it last night, I was thinking about writing an article about this very particular sensation that I think maybe would resonate with a lot of people who like these games, who are now in their mid or late 20s or in their 30s and still have this like nostalgic desire to play those old games, but maybe the act of playing them doesn't necessarily fulfill what you expect it to, or what you're hoping for it to. So it's kind of this like very optimistic mindset you're putting yourself in, or at least this is kind of how I felt last night, as like starting this thing and being like, yeah, I just want to play this game and love it and like have this same kind of feeling that I did 15 years ago playing these games, but the likelihood of me at this point in my life having enough time to actually commit to this thing,
right?
Pretty unlikely, but who knows what'll happen. You know?
Well, let's talk about one of those, which is Bayonetta. Bayonetta, for those who don't know, is a action game made by Platinum. I was going to say Silver. Platinum, much better metal. That was originally on the Wii and PS.
Xbox 360.
It was only on 360?
It was on 360. They ported it to PS3, which was a bad port, apparently.
Oh.
And then the Wii U version came years later when they did it as like a pack-in with Bayonetta 2.
See, when Bayonetta 2 is like published by Nintendo, correct, and it is only for the Wii U, and so it always just I don't know why my brain categorized it this way, because I didn't play the first Bayonetta, that I always just kind of like assumed Bayonetta 1 was originally a Wii game that was also on those other systems.
No, Platinum's only Wii game, I believe, was Mad World.
Oh.
Yeah, sure. They didn't do not the Wonderful 101, the one that was before that.
Well, the Wonderful 101 was a Wii U game.
Oh, I'm thinking of something else. Never mind.
Beautiful Joe? Beautiful Joe was GameCube. And that was Clover, technically, not Platinum, although it was all the same people. But yeah, okay. Bayonetta is a 360 action game. Much more manageable for you to take on time-wise than a 100-hour JRPG. It's like a 15-hour action game instead. But it's super good.
Yeah, Wes is right. Mad World was the only Wii game Platinum made. So there you go.
Crazy, crazy game. I remember playing it when it came out and really not liking the story and like the cutscenes and stuff. They were just a little too wacky for me. But the combat is choice. It's just it is Platinum at their best, just doing crazy combo stuff. It really is just Devil May Cry with kind of a new. It's a new style of Devil May Cry, right? But it's still a Kamiya game, so you can feel that influence there. It's still super fluid, crazy in-depth combos you can pull off, all the depth that you want out of those kind of games. And
the exciting thing is...
It's on PC now.
And, well, the exciting thing about that is it's on PC very well. It is a very good port, right? It hits 1080, 60, can go... It's locked at 60 frames per second. That seems to be the huge... like the big kind of flag, but otherwise it can go up to 4K resolution and it runs very, very well. Like I believe they were saying that a 970 can run it on max settings, 1080, 60, no problem.
Yeah, I tried that and it worked just fine.
That's good. That's a good benchmark to hit.
Yeah, and being locked at 60 FPS is not a surprise. Based on the way the game was likely programmed, doing a variable frame rate was probably not going to be in the cards. Like, obviously, we would love it if it could go up to 144. And I think most Japanese games that come out for PC in the future that are like modern console ports or, simultaneous releases if it's not a port, games like Nier, for example, I think you can expect most of those to have frame rates above 60 FPS. But I wouldn't expect many games that get ported from the previous console generations to be able to do that just because of the way they were made at the time. It's pretty unlikely that that'll happen. But 60 is good.
Yeah.
If it's better than 30, that's a good start.
It's funny because it's actually not a terrible looking game either.
And this is like kind of low bit rate and stuff.
Yeah, the video we're showing now is just off of the Steam store and then shown through our stream, but for a game that's 8 years old, like it holds up well enough. It's not gonna challenge the Witchers of the world, but no. It's an all right looking game.
Yeah, and if you have a decent PC, like you can probably run it at 4K and downsample it, and it will still run flawlessly at 60. And obviously, that's not going to make the textures look a generation newer, but it looks super, super clean. So that is a nice thing about previous gen ports, is you can just run them on pretty much anything or run them at crazy high settings.
So the question I have about this is, I never played Bayonetta 1. It's $20, 20 US dollars.
God, it's only $20.
It's only $20. Is it a game worth going back for? Is it a game that still would feel good nowadays? Is it relevant? Should people care? That kind of perspective of it.
If you like Japanese character action games, hell yeah. Because really, there have only been, how many of those have there been since Bayonetta that Platinum has made like 2. They made Bayonetta 2, and they made Nier Automata, which I think probably gets fairly close to this. And so there's like Wonderful 101 on consoles, and then their other games were kind of like, they did like the Transformers game that's kind of like a step down.
Yeah.
And the
I mean,
Korra game.
DMC to an extent.
Yeah, so DMC is is it a European developer? Is that Team Ninja who did that one?
I want to say yes.
I don't remember where Team Ninja is based, actually. But that was supposed to be really good, other than, people were really upset about the character redesign. But I think the combat was supposed to be great. And, I mean, has anybody else made a game in that vein? In the
Ninja
past
Theory.
7 years?
Yeah, there's not a lot. Like, character action is, you take them where you can get them when they're good.
So Team Ninja Gaiden, right? I think there've been like a couple Ninja Gaiden games that were not very good. The modern ones, like Ninja Gaiden Black and 2. Black especially is amazing, and 2 is pretty good, but that came out at the same time as Bayonetta, so that's old at this point as well. So, the past like 7 years have not played host to many of these types of games. So if you like them, Bayonetta is still about as good as it gets.
Yeah.
Well, Stephen, you were emphatically nodding your head yes while I was asking that question.
For $20, I think it's an obvious no-brainer. I mean, if you're totally unaware of Bayonetta, these games get crazy in a way that, well, I guess like if you've never played a Platinum game before, they are just such an experience the first time you play any of them, because they have this way of escalating the action to this absurd degree that is just every single time, like every single one of their games just has these moments where you want to put the controller down and just go like, what the fuck just happened?
both narratively and like gameplay wise. Yeah. I mean, Bayonetta opens with you like infinitely falling off a cliff on the face of like a broken clock tower, while like dragons and angelic demons attack you and like fly around in space, and you like jump between the rubble of this destroyed building, none of which it gives you any context for whatsoever. So it's
the best way I always think of it is like, okay, so like every Metal Gear Solid game ever, Metal Gear is usually like the final boss, and Platinum makes a Metal Gear Solid game, Revengeance, and the very first boss is a Metal Gear. And like that's how those games scale in terms of the action.
So that's the one we forgot, is Revengeance,
right,
which is also a Platinum game.
Right.
So like really almost no one else is making these games except for them. And that one did come to the PC. I don't think it was quite at launch, but it wasn't like too far after. So yeah, I think at this point, like it's weird that the PC is almost like the best place to play these character action games now.
Hell yeah.
And I think there are some people who would shed a tear for Anarchy Reigns, but in my mind, like the only Platinum game that's really missing from PC now is Vanquish.
Yeah.
And that's another Sega published one. I think I forget which of them owns the IP for it, but it was one that Sega published. And before Valkyria Chronicles came out, I don't think they had any intention of ever porting Vanquish to PC. But now, 2 years since they did Valkyria,
something like that, yeah.
They have done Bayonetta with Platinum, and I think it's sold fairly well so far. So, it was on the top sellers on Steam. So if we give it, another few months and it looks like Bayonetta has performed really, really well, I think maybe even if it's just performed okay, I think you can probably expect Vanquish to show up at some point.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
that will be the one that I am especially excited about because Vanquish is amazing.
And if Bayonetta is any indication, could be tomorrow, and it'll suddenly appear on Steam.
That's totally possible.
I'm fine with them doing that too. I'm fine with them just being like, "Hey, it's out now. Here you go."
Yeah.
So yeah, in
I wish all
Bayonetta,
video games came out like that.
in Bayonetta, you're a bullet witch fighting the demons from heaven or something like that, fighting angelic beasts. And in Vanquish, you're a you're a futuristic American super soldier fighting space Russians.
Okay.
Yeah, it's real good.
Well,
It's real good.
let's jump along and talk about EVE Online and talk about EVE Fanfest. Before we do that, I do want to say a quick another shout out to our sponsor this week, Drop Zone, which is now available on Steam, a RTS that I have talked about on the show before, actually. So thank you very much to them for sponsoring the show. But Steven, you were in Reykjavik, as you said. Tell us about EVE Online. Tell us about EVE Fanfest and the things you saw there.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're not familiar, FanFest is this time when CCP Games they have a community event, like 1,000 people at the very least, probably double that, fly out to Iceland. 1,000 EVE Online players and fans fly out to FanFest, and it's just this week of talking about the future of EVE Online. People celebrating, in-game alliances will definitely be struck and maybe even dissolved depending on how much alcohol was consumed and who said what.
These are in-game alliances being decided in the real world.
Yeah, so This is what's fascinating, right, is because EVE Online, I mean, I've written about it for the site for years now, and EVE Online has this very strong fiction that people essentially role play in the game. But when you go to FanFest, that fiction comes to life in that you become you're your character in this game. I mean, people aren't role playing their characters accents or doing their mannerisms or anything, but who you are in game is who you are when you're at FanFest. And people will know you more by your in-game name and your in-game exploits than they will who you are as a real person. So there's this fascinating intersection of everyone you're meeting and talking to about their experiences of playing this game. It all just bleeds over and it becomes really surreal. I think all of the journalists that were there was a lot of people who it was their first time, and I've been I've been around this before. Let me tell you. By the end of the week, you don't know what's real anymore. You frequently will hear people just being wait, is this in the game or in real life that you do this? And a lot of times it's both. So
this sounds like it borders on EVE LARPing.
Yeah, but it's not with the whole oh, you're throwing tennis balls at someone and shouting magic missile.
Hey, don't hate on LARPing, man.
You're stealing their wallet and shouting total economic collapse.
So the way I can highlight this, and if you hate the idea of EVE Online, you'll probably hate that I'm about to say this. But I had a conversation with this guy, and I was talking about what he does in the game. And what he does in EVE Online is business development. So large alliances in EVE Online pay him in-game money to come and consult and help them develop their industrial production chains to make them more efficient so that the alliance can make more money. And that's what he does in EVE Online is business development. And we had about an hour-long conversation about it. And at no point, if you had walked by that conversation, would you have maybe known that this was about a fictional virtual reality? You might have walked by and just been those guys are talking shop about business stuff in the real world. No, it was EVE Online.
So does he make his living that way, or does he just make his in-game living that way?
So in real life, he was a network administrator. So there's a bit of overlap there, but no, that was just what he did in game, and he was really effective at it. Apparently, he had a lot of money in the game.
That's amazing.
Because alliances. So the thing about EVE Online is skills because it's such a people-focused game. Skills you have in the real world tend to translate very well to skills you have in EVE Online. So if you're a good manager in the real world, you can use those skills in game and also become a good manager, if that makes any sense. So it's a very bizarre game because of that.
It actually reminds me a lot of my experience talking to the creator of Dwarf Fortress. And
right.
you don't have the same potential in Dwarf Fortress for like this, for actually making real money, or any of those, applying those kind of MMO experiences. But the way he makes Dwarf Fortress is very similar to what EVE gives some people, in that to represent to his satisfaction physics, for example, he just learns all the physics he needs to know to then program it, and like he talked to me about doing personalities for the dwarves, and this was on an interview I published a couple months ago, where they started out with like 5 personality archetypes that was kind of like an intro to psychology level understanding of psychology. But then they're like, oh no, actually personality is a lot more nuanced than that. And so they go to this like deeper level, and then they had like 40 personalities. But then they're like, yeah, but there's still like some stuff kind of missing from there. And so they ended up having like 50 something different personality traits for the dwarves to represent sort of the way psychologists classify our personalities, essentially. And like, that was a thing that he just learned by going through textbooks until he was satisfied enough with the degree of fidelity to his simulation.
The day Dwarf Fortress becomes an MMO is the day the world ends. Like once those two bridges meet, or those two, like that gap closes, it's Armageddon.
It won't need to, because Dwarf Fortress is almost to a point so adept at simulating people, it won't even need people to play it. It'll just play itself.
That's the thing, yeah. It's more likely to achieve sentience than it is to, to be an MMO.
So one of the stories that didn't come out of FanFest exactly, or it didn't come out of FanFest originally, that I wanted to call out is, Steven, you wrote this story for the magazine that we then posted online just this last week. Called How a Scam in EVE Online Turned into Its Greatest Rescue Mission. And I highly recommend everybody go to PC Gamer, either pick up last month's issue of PCGamer.com, or PC Gamer magazine, or go to PCGamer.com/EVE-online and look for that story, How a Scam in EVE Online Turned into Its Greatest Rescue Mission. Because it's downright incredible. Like, you've been producing these EVE stories for the site and the mag for a long time, but it never ceases to amaze me what can come out of that world and what can come out of that game, to the point where this story you wrote about like a guy rescuing new players who were being like basically forced into slave labor camps. Like it sounds like a script for a movie. Like you could take what was happening and remove the it's in a video game part of it and make it a movie. Like you could sell that to Hollywood 100%.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't want to get too philosophical about it, but it was kind of what I was saying earlier, and it's because EVE Online is just about humans interacting with other humans in a sandbox. That's what gives rise to these stories, is just like in the real world, this stuff happens all the time. It can happen in EVE Online. So yeah, that story is like a 1 in a million story, I think, when it comes to, like, because I've been writing EVE stories for a while. Never have I seen anything like that happen. So even that was exceptionally rare in terms of a story.
It's a really fascinating comparison with other MMOs, especially, but kind of online games that have these living worlds, where you can see just what a big difference it makes when the entire design is around people first, and not story first, or quests first, or whatever. Like you look at WoW, and your most interesting stories that you've written about WoW too, which you've been playing for since it came out, or for a very long time, they're not about some awesome like quest you went on. They're about the way a person plays to choose the game, like kind of outside the bounds of our expectations. And like one of our other freelancers, Luke, wrote a really good story about this guild of blind players who have like taken down basically all of the hardest deaf players, not blind players. So without being able to hear some really important audio cues in the game, they were still able to defeat all of these raids through just like amazing execution and timing and teamwork. And that's way more interesting than just the details of this raid that Blizzard came up with and, the story they attached to it. And nobody ever talks about anything in EVE that is like in-game narrative or in-game anything like
I
that,
still
right?
don't fully understand how the game is played. Like, there is a very, very large gap in my understanding of what EVE actually is. Because people talk about, oh, when you die, you lose your upgrades or your skill points. And so there's some sort of RPG leveling up with skills and stuff. But I literally don't know how that part of it works. I know how corporations fight each other and how people scam each other and do horrible things more than I know, like, the basics of playing the game.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny, right? Because so little about what makes EVE great has to do with the game itself.
Really?
The game is, the game is almost incidental to everything that's great about EVE Online, which is the people inhabiting it and this history that they have with one another. But to answer your question, once you make a character, you just gain skill points passively per hour. And then when you log in, you can just assign them sort of to a certain skill.
It really is just like living.
Yeah, essentially. So but the crazy thing is okay, if you want to pilot a Titan, which is like the giant motherships of EVE Online, they're huge. That takes something like 3 years of skill training to get there.
And if you die, you just lose all of that?
No, so you always keep your skill points, but what you'll lose is things like your ships.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And that stuff I know the old adage that's also in Elite to maybe a slightly lesser extent because of the insurance of don't fly anything you can't afford to lose, basically. Right. It's just a fascinating thing to me. And I mean, I guess it's on me for not having learned that stuff now that they have a free-to-play level of it. But
right.
It's still so crazy intimidating, especially when you read stories about this new person took advantage of all these new players and flew them into Russian space so that they couldn't communicate with anybody. I'm like, I would be that guy. I would be the dope that is taken advantage of.
So there's good news though, because right now, in line with their free to play move, CCP's biggest effort and a ton of resources are going into how to crack or untie the knot of making this game way more accessible for people. And they've actually brought in this new guy. He's really interesting. His name is CCP Ghost is his code name and for the developer. But he actually comes from this history of bank fraud in Iceland, and his job was interrogating people who had committed fraud and finding ways to get them to confess. And he's a very philosophical person.
Damn.
And yeah, they have this very weird new agey approach to it, which is that there's this new tutorial in the game now that they released late last year, I want to say. And this new tutorial is much more traditional in the sense that it gives you a story, it gives you goals to pursue, and it teaches you how to play the game much more traditionally. And then from there kind of tosses you out into the universe once you know what you're doing, versus the traditional EVE approach, which is that you log in for the first time and you're just sitting in space. And you're like, okay, what do I do? The game doesn't tell you anything. And that's how you wind up in Russian space in a labor camp.
Oh my God. What is... Wait. I'm wrapping my head around this. Give me a moment here.
Sure.
You skipped over the fact... you just kind of mentioned the fact that CCP hired a bank fraud interrogator?
Yeah.
And then, what? What is his job?
Okay, the reason I skipped it out, he's in charge of making the new player experience better. I don't even understand it. No one understands it.
Or is that just completely a cover for him investigating the most nefarious shit going on in these games?
This is very behind the curtain of EVE Fanfest, but he walks out on stage to give presentations and everyone in the audience is confused. But what he also is saying makes sense in a really abstract way, and it's working for the game. Because the new player tutorial, and what I was going to say is if you're curious about EVE, you've heard all these negative things, now is the time to try it because they have a new tutorial system, which apparently is very, very well done. And this guy designed it, but he's almost one of those people where he's too intelligent for me. I don't understand what he's saying, but I can see that it's working. So I just nod my head and go, okay.
So as the infield reporter at EVE Fanfest, what was Was there any drama? Like, what was the biggest thing that sort of like were alliances broken that were very unexpected? Was someone backstabbed? Was someone literally stabbed? Like, what happened?
No, you know what? So the kind of anticlimactic thing is those things are there, but they won't happen. You won't feel the consequences of them for a couple of months.
Wow.
So I'm sure someone said something to someone while they were drunk, and you know it ruined that friendship. But you won't know for a couple of months. But I guarantee it happened. But I can't think of anything off the top of my head. There was lots of booing when they started getting people to do like shout outs, like, oh, the major alliances are here. If you're from this alliance, you know, cheer and clap. And then there was this one alliance that everybody hates and everyone in the room booed. That was a good moment.
Oh my God.
Is Goonswarm still a big power?
That was the alliance that everyone booed.
Okay. All right. I mean, they used to rule that
kind
shit
of a power
at one point. Right?
But they got busted down a huge peg last year because of the big war.
The great
God,
war.
Stuff.
I love talking about EVE. I wish we could just talk about EVE for an entire episode because I feel like we wouldn't run out of things to say.
This is a bad podcast to do it because my voice is so done.
Yeah, we can give you a break.
But real quick though, do you have any stories you're planning to write out of FanFest?
So the story that you were talking about, Tom, is the story of Scooter McCabe, who I wrote about actually after EVE Vegas as the game's most notorious scammer. And one of the stories I'm looking, which will be up on the site later this week, will be basically his character foil, which is I have an interview with the most reputable man in EVE Online, which I'm really excited about. So in a game where nobody trusts anyone, this guy is the guy that you can always trust. And he has a really fascinating backstory. So you can look forward to that interview. And I have a magazine interview, which will be going up in one of the upcoming issues. I'm not sure which one yet. So I definitely got some good EVE fodder you can look forward to in the next couple months, and a few other things.
I love hearing that all this stuff takes so long in the EVE world too, because it lends an air of another air, I should say, of realism to the whole thing that, you know, these corporations and these machinations and this plotting can't just happen over a week. You know, it's not like somebody can just infiltrate a corp. Like they have to spend months and months and months putting in the legwork to do it.
Well, and it's funny, right? Because EVE is like the time that I actually, whenever I'm writing EVE stories, that's the time when I feel like the most like a real journalist, because there are times where I'm like, I'm having to go deep. I'm having to like kind of twist arms or, you know, get people to open up to me, figure out the right angles to get people to want to tell me their secrets. And I really feel like a deep investigative reporter when I'm writing EVE stories.
And then we have you write about like silly things and butts.
Right. About the worst video game ever made. Plumbers don't wear ties.
Oh, yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Steven basically had to, for those of you who didn't see that article, basically had to write about a softcore porn video game from the 90s. And he did it valiantly. He put aside his high journalistic integrity of writing about EVE Online.
Sometimes you need a break from that real shit.
Yeah. No,
it's
like it's almost a relief to write those stories. The funny thing about that story specifically is I didn't include any image, but you say softcore porn, and that's pretty true. But there was a moment where I had a folder with like 100 shots of some dude's naked thighs and like butt and stuff. And I tried to include a few of them, and we ended up pulling them from the article because we were like, oh, we don't want to make this like instantly and like a not safe for work article. People can find this stuff if they want to dig for it. But like I had to instantly delete that folder because I was like, this is a risky folder to have of just like one dude shower scene, 100 screenshots.
So here's a question I have for you, actually.
Sure.
A final EVE question. You write a lot of EVE stories.
Mm-hmm.
You play the game, but not like as crazily as some other MMOs that you play, right?
Yeah. It's probably like, yeah.
Yeah. What do the people you interview think of you? Like, are you a character in this play now, or like, are you worried that if you write something, like you'll like lose face or like lose contacts and relationships? Because it's a very real thing to be a reporter in the middle of all of this very real stuff that's happening within the game.
Okay, so I'll let you in on a secret. I have multiple accounts, and sometimes I don't tell people who I am in real life because I know that they won't talk to me based on who I really am. But I'll tell them later. Once they've already talked to me, I'll tell them who I am. And if they really didn't want to talk to me, I wouldn't run the interview anyway.
It seems like it's naive to assume that anybody who plays EVE, like seriously, doesn't have multiple accounts. Like that's
right.
like seems like it's just a given.
So I am a bit of a character. Not like I don't want to like overblow it and say like, oh, I'm a celebrity in EVE or any, like I'm not that level at all. But yeah, there are people who won't talk to me because of they think I have certain affiliations. So like you mentioned Goonswarm, and I've written stories about Goonswarm in the past, and there are people who just think I'm a mouthpiece for them. Like I'm just propaganda for Goonswarm, which is hilarious to bring up this idea that Stephen Messner, the contributing editor of PC Gamer, is like secretly a mole inside of PC Gamer just to talk about how great Goonswarm is all the time. Like it's absurd, but also the truth.
We have to edit this part out of the podcast.
Yeah, we'll cut it.
But yeah, so I mean, people know of me. So I'm in a sense like you have to be a character in it. Well, you become a character whether you want to or not.
Well, that's now you know what your next piece should be is like a hit piece on Goonswarm to get all of the people off your back, right?
Yeah, but like, so yeah, I have fake accounts that I use so that people don't immediately see. So I have a chance to explain myself because people, what they'll do is if I contact them from my main account, they can go into my history and see which alliances I've been with, and they'll make assumptions about me. Even though like a lot of the times I'm like, oh no, I was only flying with those guys for a story or to go undercover or something like that. It's really bizarre.
Colin R80 in the chat says, the Dan Rather of the EVE universe. Yeah. Also, Tool727 just subscribed, so thank you very much for that. And on that note, thank you, Stephen, for sharing those. Let's open it up to the Twitch chat Q&A. If you guys have a question for us, tag us with @PCGamer in the Twitch chat. I will get to your question. If you're a subscriber on Twitch, we will love to grab your questions first. So thank you very much for supporting the stream. We are always right here, twitch.tv/PCGamer, 1 p.m. Pacific time for the start of the show, around 2:10, 2:15-ish for the Q&A. So you're welcome to join us and ask your questions live if you would like. We'd love to have you here. So, and if you asked a question earlier in the stream that I missed or we were talking during, please repost it. Right off the bat, PM Floyd94 subscriber asks, what do you think of the new Star Wars Battlefront 2 trailer? Any thoughts on the new campaign system they're adding? Yeah, so that's one of the pieces of news that we didn't talk about actually at the beginning of the show, which is a teaser trailer, like a 30-second teaser trailer for Battlefront 2 leaked. It didn't even really reveal a whole lot, but there are some things we can glean from it, like they're going to go into the prequel trilogy because we saw Darth Maul. They're probably going to do the middle trilogy and the later one. It
looks like all three eras, yeah.
Yeah, so there's going to be a bunch of eras. We knew ahead of time that it was going to have a campaign of some sort, right?
We kind of talked about that just very, very generally, yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was a cool trailer. Like, I mean, the thing mainly is that like a cinematic trailer isn't gonna, like a cool cinematic trailer is not gonna fix the problems I had with that game. Like I'll need to see actually what they've changed gameplay wise. But yeah, I think it'd be cool. And we were talking earlier, I think it'd be cool if they did some sort of like a campaign similar to Battlefield 1's, where it was like, here's, you know, a 2-hour-long campaign set in the prequel. Here's a 2-hour-long campaign set in the original trilogy, and then here's a 2-hour-long campaign set in this other part. You know, I would be into that.
I would not be surprised if that's the approach they're taking. So in the trailer, they kind of hint at a story about a woman Imperial officer who was like in the battle for Endor when the Empire loses and then continues to fight in some capacity. That was kind of the only little bit of narrative that they showed in that trailer. So maybe that's the entire campaign from this one person's perspective. But my guess would be, based on like them showing the other eras, is that they're going to do more vignettes that'll be like an hour long and kind of little, just bespoke little stories for each time period. That could be a really cool approach to do Star Wars. I much prefer that to another like retelling of and then you play as Obi-Wan and fight the clone army, and then you play as Luke, and you go to the Death Star. Like, we've seen that, we've done that plenty of times. Just come up with some new stories in those settings. Like, that'll be much more interesting.
My secret wish for the campaign of that game is that they run as far away from canon as they possibly can, and they it
will be 100% canon. They will not do that.
I just want, like, Darth Maul, like, on random planets fighting Leia and stuff, and that's what lean into the campaign the same way that the multiplayer leans into that stuff, where it's just like Darth Vader fighting Han Solo on Hoth is like nothing that ever happened, but like, why not? That's a thing that can happen in that game.
You just want like Star Wars Smash Brothers?
I want licensed Star Wars fan fiction. That's what I want. I want them to just be like, we have the license to make these characters. Let's just do crazy stuff and tell weird stories that no other Star Wars game will be able to tell.
Yeah, not gonna happen.
I know. Anyway,
yeah,
but maybe they'll put Grand Admiral Thrawn in it. That would make me happy.
Which one is he?
Yeah, never mind.
All right. Varendeel asks...
People who know anything about the expanded universe will know what I'm talking about.
Okay. Real quick clarification. I want to spend no more than 10 seconds on this. Is it expanded universe or extended universe? I'd always heard extended.
Expanded.
Okay. Moving on. Varendeel asks, is there any game that you really want to play but put off because there's such a huge time investment? That's the only thing from stopping me starting a second playthrough of the Witcher trilogy. My answer to that would probably be Enhanced Edition of Divinity, which I just recently got through. But Enhanced Edition is like an intimidating game because it's a game I'd already beaten, and I really wanted to play I'd already beaten the original version. I really wanted to play the Enhanced Edition, but I looked at it and I know A, I got to get through Cyseal, and B, after I get through Cyseal, there's another 60 to 70 hours worth of game to play, which is like a lot to devote to a game you've already given 80 hours. So for me, it was that, and I'm happy to say that I recently broke through it. Anything for you guys?
Dwarf Fortress for me. Like, I've played it some, like, enough to learn it, but to really get into it it's huge.
Just any game longer than 50 hours. I feel like I'm constantly just like, I don't know if I can do this.
I'm just gonna go grind and WoW for 2 months.
Which is that's the great hypocrisy of my life, which is that I'm like, oh, I can't play this game, but I'll play WoW forever and I'll play Rocket League for 500 hours. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
It's the same kind of mental commitment as you like sit down and you're like, I don't want to watch a movie that's like 2 hours is too much.
Right.
I'm just gonna watch TV. 7 hours later, you're like, oh, okay, I guess I should go to bed now. I just watched an entire season of TV.
Yeah. Which I do all the time. So, like, I like bite-sized things. I can't deal with commitment. Which just got to a whole deep level of my life. I'm kidding.
Moving on.
Max Ursa,
just start crying.
Max Ursa real quick points out Grand Admiral Thrawn is in the Rebels TV show, and he's the big bad guy season 3.
Yes, he is.
Okay, so you already know that.
Oh, yeah, I know that. I haven't watched the show, but I might because he's in it.
Thomas behind the camera also giving us a thumbs up on that one.
So the character is basically what if Sherlock Holmes, but evil admiral.
I'm in. I mean, that's completely baffling, but I'm in.
Like, he's like the tactical genius, thinks 3 moves ahead of everybody, analyzes people by their like habits and ticks and that kind of stuff, but is evil in Star Wars.
Yeah, yes, Steven.
He's also blue.
He is blue.
Thank
you for that little bit of description.
I thought that was the most important part of his personality and just in general.
I don't define people by the color of their skin.
It is important because the
he's
Empire,
blue Sherlock Holmes.
The Empire is super racist, but he's so good that they're like, all right, you can be an admiral because you're so good. We're still racist, but
all right, let's take some more questions. Stabby McStabstab12 thank you for that name, just right off the bat. Squad just had a free weekend on Steam. Have you guys played, and what are your impressions compared to Arma, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and Battlefield? Think it will be a success when it comes out of alpha. Steven?
Yeah, no, I've played Squad. I can't compare it to Arma because I don't think I've played enough Arma to say, but I really like Squad. It's that hardcore shooter that you want, but stripped down to not be nearly as intimidating as Arma to get into. I think it's in a really happy middle ground between having sort of both elements of being you can sit down and hop into Squad just by yourself on a Friday night, and you don't have to go through like everything that Arma can kind of drag along with it. But at the same time, it still has a lot of tactical depth. It's still a game that you really have to rely on your faculties is what I love about it. Like you need situational awareness. You still need to be able to call targets and give that information succinctly so the rest of your squad knows where the enemy is at. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. I know that they're planning on adding vehicles and stuff. I think that'll be really good for it. I think it's a good game. I don't know if I could recommend it one or the other. Battlegrounds is that's a battle royale game, whereas Squad is still just like a team-based shooter. So I wouldn't even compare those two. But between it and Arma, I think that you could almost just get them both and enjoy them both for what they are.
Blasphemy. Pick a camp.
I said it. I took a really moderate approach on that question. I'm not doing any of the chest beating tribalism. No. They're both good games.
If you
only one good game can exist.
If you do a search,
that's real battle royale
on our site. Ian Birnbaum, who writes about a lot of shooters for us, wrote a piece about Squad maybe 4 months ago, something like that. I think he's done a couple actually, but he recommends it a lot and has written about the good things about it and some of the stuff it still needs, as it progresses.
JBJ Blaze, I think our longest subscriber, asks, have you guys played the new Overwatch Uprising Brawls, and if so, what y'all think? We talked about that a little bit before at the beginning of the show.
You're the only one who's played it, I think.
Yeah, I'm the only one who's played it in this room. Bo has been playing a bunch of it too. I think it's really, really fun. I would like to see more events. It's interesting because as an event, I think it's less interesting than some of the holiday ones, but I think the event mode, the brawl itself, is more interesting than almost any other mode they've done so far. So I'm into it, man. He also asks, do I have your guys' explicit permission to record/produce a narration of this mighty story of Valiance by Steven? Steven?
No.
All right. There you go.
If anyone's doing it, it's me when my voice recovers. Sorry, man.
Okay. There's your answer.
I hate to shut you down in public in front of everyone.
He'll understand.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's take some more questions. Chaos Squall, I think, is that one. What do we think of the Black Desert upcoming update? Any more info on this? Steven, do you know about... You're our MMO man. Do you see that? You just got glasses, but you just did like a really classy, adjustment of your glasses.
As I'm saying, no, I have no idea what this update is. That's what I was.
All right.
So you completely misread what I was trying to communicate.
Was
no,
Black Desert
I haven't played
one...
Black Desert in a while, so I'm not up to date on it, unfortunately.
That was the one you reviewed and were not super fond of.
Nope.
No, that wasn't that one. What was that? Blade and Soul or something?
Blade and Soul, yeah.
Is that a different...
Blade and Soul, or more recently, I think the last MMO before WoW that I reviewed was, I can't remember. It wasn't Black Desert, though. So, yeah, I'm sorry. I can't say.
Steven plays MMOs the way I play free-to-play card games.
That's true. But, yeah, Black Desert's kind of in my blind spot right now because you can only juggle so many MMOs at one time.
Like 7 or so.
Yeah. Honestly, yeah. It's real sad.
Shirak89 asks, Wes, what is your favorite faction in Total War Warhammer, and what did you think of the Orc faction?
So I haven't played the Greenskins, actually.
Well, I guess, so he just asked Warhammer specifically, or generally? Maybe not Total War.
So I don't know, I've never played a Warhammer game outside of this one, except for... Warhammer the End Times Vermintide, and I've played a little bit of Dawn of War years ago, and I played a little of Space Marine. I played the demo of Space Marine, but those are both 40K. So I don't Warhammer lore wise. I don't have a favorite. From what I've played of the campaign and what I've seen with all the factions in Total War Warhammer, the vampire counts are my favorite from a unit perspective. Like their units are just really cool and weird and gross. Some of them, the zombies and the dragons and whatnot. My favorite to play, I don't know. So I haven't actually played the elves yet, but they seem really good because they're one of the few factions, or maybe the only faction that can conquer like any territory anywhere in the world, whereas most of the other factions are limited to certain parts of the world that they're allowed to control. And they have like giant tree men and like they just have really cool looking units. But of the ones I've played, the vampire counts have been my most fun to control in combat, but on like the strategic level, kind of boring. Like their tech tree is really just bland and uninteresting, and their political options are very, very small.
All right. It was cool to hear you guys talk about Total War Warhammer so much because it's a game that I wanted to try it when it released, but I actually haven't really touched.
It's totally worth it.
The new Bretonia faction looks really fun as well because they're like super cavalry based and also like magic cavalry, knights. So.
Maybe now is the time for me to jump back in.
And they have Crusader Kings 2 like personality traits.
Huh.
So like if they lose a battle and they run away, they might become cowards, and then they'll get debuffs to future battles, like their courage in future battles.
They're all about that chivalry.
That. Yeah, it's a cool system.
Here's an interesting question for Steven. If you had to recommend an MMORPG to someone who had never played one, what would it be?
I mean, like, kind of depends on the person's personality. World of Warcraft is always going to be like the solid everyman choice because it's the everyman's MMO. But I would also say like maybe Final Fantasy 14 would be like a really good, strong second opinion or second choice to WoW. But I love WoW. I still play WoW all the time. So I think it's WoW's kind of the best.
So I just don't really like MMOs as a genre, but of the ones I played, I found Guild Wars 2 far more fun to just play than either Final Fantasy 14 or WoW. Caveat, I played WoW when there was one expansion. So that was 2006, 2007.
And even now that you say that, I'm kind of like, oh, shoot, you're kind of right. Like MMOs are actually kind of in this good place right now where it's really sort of player's choice of which ones. The good news is because most of them have free-to-play trials, you can very easily just kind of try them all out and then just see which one is best. There's very few MMOs I can think of off the top of my head. Actually, none of them that would make you buy it or buy a subscription first.
What about who would you recommend The Secret World to? That's the name, right? Secret World?
Yeah, The Secret World. And they're revamping it this year. So The Secret World I would recommend to anyone who loves the idea of an MMO that does storytelling right, which is like there are missions in The Secret World where you need to use an internet browser in order to solve the puzzles. Like you're doing genuine research, and it's really cool and interesting. Like you'll be on like Wikipedia pages looking for the clue to this puzzle, and that type of stuff is so brilliant. So The Secret World's really cool, but it has like really bad combat. So I'm hoping that this revamp they're planning for this year or next year or whenever it is ends up fixing a lot of the problems because it's got amazing potential in terms of story.
That's really unexpected. That's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it reminds me, it harkens back to the days of like early Myst games where you had to play those games with a pad of paper and a pencil, right? To just take notes of every time you see a symbol on a wall, basically.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that in it. I mean, those investigation missions that I was just talking about are pretty, like, it's not every mission's like that.
Right.
But there's a lot of this sort of, you play it a lot more intentionally than you play another MMO, which is very much like you could almost have Netflix going on a second screen and you're just grinding. Secret World is like you're playing it and immersing yourself in a really cool story. Like it's got a great world, and it's a secret. That was a dumb joke.
Get out. Just because of that, we're ending the show.
Yeah.
No, actually, we are ending the show because we are out of time. Thank you very much, everyone, for your questions. We appreciate them greatly. We will be, of course, back here at twitch.tv/PCGamer next week, 1 p.m. Wednesday Pacific time, to bring you all of your needs in the PC gaming talkabouts world.
In the PC gaming secret world.
Heyo. Of course, you can catch the audio at pcgamer.com/podcast or download it there directly or on iTunes. You can watch the show in its entirety at youtube.com/PCGamer if you'd like to there. Thank you once again to our sponsor for this week's episode, Drop Zone, which is now available free to play on Steam. And we will see all of you guys next week.